Hey, everybody. This is the first episode of the Behind the Screens podcast. I am Nate Harrington, joined with Matt Galka. Matt, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, Nate, how are you? Yep, Matt Gelka here. We're doing this. We're not exactly in the same room as each other, but we might as well be. I mean, I can see you. You can see me. It's a good thing.
This has been kind of an idea Matt and I have thrown around for a little while. At least for the last several months, we were just interesting local news stories. And we thought, a lot of people don't get the insight into local news like we have. We both work in local news. Matt is a reporter, has been one for several years. I'm actually a meteorologist, but had to do some one-man banding and MMJing. But local news is an interesting creature, and we feel like more people need to know what it's all about.
And I think for a lot of people, local news is, it's somebody after a murder happens, they knock on the neighbor's door and everybody's just saying, oh, wow, what a nice guy. I can't believe it happened. But that's not really what goes into everything. I mean, think about how many news stories happen every week that we see maybe on the national networks, but the local guys are the people who really are covering it better. But not everybody can watch the local guys. They're watching the national network and they're seeing that 40,000 view. But that's why we wanted to get the real boots on the ground kind of story. How did you get that story? How did you talk to that person? What was it like talking to that person? What was it like being at the demonstration? What was it like being at that riot? Because not everybody really understands. And in this day and age, I assure you, Nate, I don't know if you could assure people, this is not fake news, what we're doing. We're not faking the news right now.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, we're going to give you, hopefully, on a week-to-week basis, we're going to go over some of the more interesting stories, local news stories that make headlines nationally, and kind of dive into why they were interesting, what happened, how they're covered. And hopefully we're going to also have some guests that come on that cover some of these interesting news stories and give their perspective on how they were covered, because everyone is different. They all report differently. We all do the process a little bit differently. So we're going to get some different takes, different viewpoints on how local news is covered, and hopefully give you guys that are in the business and maybe that aren't in the business a little bit of insight into what goes into creating a local news story that might take 2, 3, 4 days to put together, but then you only get about, 2 minutes airtime, Matt? It's just kind of frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, an 8-hour day condensed into a minute and a half, usually. That's how every day goes. And hopefully, you mentioned people in the business. Hopefully people who are new to the business or journalism students, hopefully this will give a little insight into how the business really works. At least I remember when I was in school, my professors didn't sugarcoat it. They flat out told me, just because you're on TV doesn't mean you're going to be making any money, and it's not going to be easy. And both of those things came true, at least in the first job. So hopefully this could be a resource for especially young journalists who are just kind of breaking in and who might need a little bit of insight into how this thing really works. So Nate, why don't you tell people, I guess, about how you wound up here?
Well, like I said, I'm a meteorologist by trade. I got my degree at Florida State University, class of 2006, go Noles. And my first job was in Minnesota. Well, small market, Minnesota, Mankato, shout out. You have to MMJ. Back in the mid-2000s, that's what every up-and-coming meteorologist that was their first job, that's what they basically had to do. You had to be a general assignment reporter 3 days a week. You worked the weekends, and then you reported the other 3 days. I had no formal training whatsoever in journalism, in mass communications, in news gathering. I grew up watching the news. I was a news junkie growing up. I would watch the local news to watch the meteorologist, but I would also tune in to watch the news. And I always loved the news. So I kind of have an idea of what it took, but I really didn't, because on-the-job training for about a week or two before I actually got to do my first assignment by myself was the most terrifying thing ever. So I learned on the job. I learned how to shoot. I learned how to edit. I learned how to write. I learned how to do all of it, put together a pretty good story. And I turned out to be a pretty decent reporter. I'm not going to say good. I turned out to be a pretty decent reporter, if I do say so myself. And even now I do a little bit on the side. Went to Tallahassee, where I met Matt at WCTV in Tallahassee. And was a little bit of a general assignment reporter too, did some more weather type stories. Went to Dothan, Alabama, became the main evening meteorologist there 5 nights a week, and actually got out of the reporting gig. Didn't have to report, didn't have to pick up a camera, didn't have to write any stories, and I kind of missed it. It was funny. I having to go out and do stories every day when I was my first 2 jobs, when I had to work and go out and do my MMJ stuff. But when I got behind the desk and in front of the green wall every day and didn't have to report, I kind of missed it a little bit because I missed telling stories. And I'm sure Matt will tell you the same thing. That's kind of why he got into it too. The storytelling aspect is awesome. And I'm always inspired by some of the stories I see and some of the heart and grit it takes to get these stories on the air. So now I'm actually in Birmingham, Alabama, at WIAT, CBS 42. And I'm a meteorologist on the weekends. I do weather reporting. We just got done with a big drought here. Well, we're not done with the drought, but we finally got some rain around here. So that's been the big story the last few days. I've covered tornadoes in Minnesota. I've covered tornadoes here. I just got done with covering Hurricane Matthew along the East Coast back in October. Myself and 3 of my colleagues were gallivanting around the East Coast from Jacksonville all the way up to Savannah, covering Hurricane Matthew. So I've kind of done it all. In a helicopter earlier this year, covering a gas pipeline explosion, literally in a helicopter, doing a live shot in a phoner. That's something that we'll probably actually talk about, but the logistics behind that are pretty interesting. So that's my story, at least in a little bit of a nutshell. And I was going to mention this, that Matt's professors didn't sugarcoat anything for him because he went to the Harvard of communication schools.
I'm glad you called it that. That's very nice of you. That's very nice for an HCC foe to call Syracuse that. So, okay, I guess I'll take it from here. I did go to Syracuse University. I grew up in Connecticut, and I'm a long way from home now. But Connecticut to Syracuse University. The plan was when I was 14. Actually, sorry, when I was 11, the plan was to be an NFL player. And when I was 14, that dream waved goodbye to me real quick. So then. What was the fallback? Well, I like telling stories, and that's why I got into journalism. So I went to Syracuse. And after Syracuse, I went to grad school right away. It's not something that everybody does. I'd say it's not even 50-50. I'd say very few people who wind up on TV get their master's degree right away. But I did. For a variety of reasons. I mean, the economy was real bad in 2009 when I graduated. So that wasn't jumping right into a career, wasn't exactly happening right away. So I went to grad school at Quinnipiac University. And if that sounds familiar, it's because you always hear them polling in politics. And if that sounds familiar this year, it's because they got every single one wrong, but that's okay. So did everybody else. So I went to Quinnipiac University, great journalism program there. It really opened a lot of doors for me. And I started behind the scenes at NBC Connecticut, where I met a lot of great people, a lot of talented people. And that's sort of where I learned the ropes. I mean, I did literally every job behind the scenes. I started running the teleprompter, which is the bottom of the totem pole, the absolute worst. I ran the cameras. I did the audio.
Any teleprompter operators out there right now?
Yeah, if you teleprompter operators are listening, you can do it. So I ran the cameras at one point. I did editing. I really learned the ins and outs behind the scenes. At the same time, I was trying to get in front of the camera, and I sent out tapes everywhere. And Tallahassee called. I moved down to Tallahassee. It's a long way from home. That's where I met Nate. Nate and I actually had the pleasure of co-anchoring a couple of shows together.
Yeah. And
I remember when I first co-anchored with Nate, it was the first time I've ever anchored, and if you could see a human heart beating through a coat of a suit, you would have seen mine. I was so nervous. So that's where Nate and I met, and then I took another job. I'm still in Tallahassee now. I'm a political reporter. It's a statewide gig. I'm on 7 stations now, a little more exposure. Tampa, Jacksonville, Fort Myers, Gainesville, Tallahassee still, Panama City, and Pensacola. Got them all. So I'm on 7 stations now covering state politics. And, I know a lot of people, when they hear politics, their eyes glaze over. But that's where storytelling comes in, and that's what I really do love is I love telling good stories, especially when people say, oh, I don't care about politics. Well, it's my job to try and make you care. It's my job to tell you why you're going to care. Okay, you might not care until a year from now when your taxes go up, and then you tell me you care and you tell me you're pissed off. Well, you should have listened to me a year ago, and we could have both prevented this. So that's what I like doing. I like telling stories. I like making what could be boring stories a little better or a little more watchable. And Nate covered Hurricane Matthew just about a month ago or 2 months ago. Hurricane Hermine rolled through this side of the state. It wasn't really as bad as Hurricane Matthew in a lot of ways, but in Tallahassee it was pretty bad. We lost power for a little bit. And I like doing weather coverage, cover tropical storms. That's one of my favorite stories I ever did when I took a boat, and this probably will come up one time. I took a boat with a guy whose house was totally flooded. It was the only way to get to his house. His street was basically a river, and that's some of the cool stuff we get to do when we do local news. It's a grind. It could be a lot of fun. It could be a lot of not fun sometimes. But it's again, I go back to the storytelling. That's why I still do it. That's why I still love doing it. And basically, that's why Nate and I are doing this podcast because we like talking, not because we like hearing the sound of our own voice, but we like telling stories. I know Nate's got some good ones. I've got some good ones. They'll probably all come up. And I know the people that we're going to have on this show, and I'm confident they'll come on this show, once they hear this first episode, they'll be like, wow, I got to get on there. I'm confident we'll have them on the show, and a lot of people will tell a lot of interesting stories. And I know Nate knows a lot of people all around the country. I know a lot of people all around the country. For those of you listening, if you've ever heard, oh, this business is really small, and then you roll your eyes like I did, well, this business is really small because I'm from Connecticut and I'm in Tallahassee. And if you asked me when I was 21 years old if that would ever happen, I would have told you no, but here I am.
Yeah, and I know people, like you said, all over the country that have interesting stories to tell. And that's what we hope to bring you on a weekly basis, every week. Haven't nailed down exactly what day we're going to do this with local news. Obviously, schedules can be pretty fluid. So we'll nail down a time and a place when we're most likely going to do this. And we'll let all of you know, and hopefully you tune in. We're going to have the video version. We'll also have a audio version that we'll be able to post. Hopefully a website coming soon. We'll also have I've got some written content ideas too, Matt, that I didn't clue you in on, but hopefully some written content as well to go with our podcast every week. And really looking forward to this. There's a lot of good stuff out there, and the stories need to be told. The folks that don't know exactly what goes into it and that need to appreciate it are going to appreciate it, hopefully, after listening to this. So don't want to belabor the point too much, but we've got a lot of good stuff coming your way, guys, and hopefully you tune in.
So remember, Behind the Screens, it's a catchy name. Nate came up with it. Give credit where credit is due. Behind the Screens, because when you watch TV, there's a screen in front of you, and we're going to go behind that screen, not physically, maybe one day, but not now. But we're going to go behind the screens. And if you think about just the stories in the past week, you had that breaking news out of Washington, D.C. that had to do with fake news. You had Ohio State last week. And those are just things, you might watch CNN or MSNBC. But there are local people covering that. And it's different when local people cover it. And it's not all going to be bad news. Even though those two things were bad news, it's not all going to be bad news. It's going to be some good stuff too. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun. Behind the Screens, we'll get it out there. We'll get a page up, like, share, comment. What do you want to hear about? What do you want to know? We'll answer it all. And like I said, we're going to have a lot of fun. So hopefully you tune in each and every week.
Yes, you do. All right, we're going to close out episode 1 of Behind the Screens. Stay tuned for episode 2 next week, guys. We'll see you later.
See ya.